In the vast expanse of the universe, many species thrived, evolved, and eventually met their decline. The humans, however, were different. Feared for their unpredictability and resilience, they had carved a path through the stars, always on the edge of extinction, but never fully defeated. The Galactic Council had long debated the role of humans. To some, they were a necessary evil, dangerous, but useful in times of war. To others, they were a threat to be neutralized. No one, however, could deny the incredible adaptability of humanity. They had been underestimated once before, but never again. For years, the humans have been locked in a brutal conflict with the Thren, a technologically superior species. The Thren had decimated human colonies and crippled their fleets, pushing them to the brink of annihilation. And yet, humanity stood firm, their resolve only growing stronger with each loss. On the human command ship, Captain Elena Mendez stood before the tactical display, her brow furrowed as she analyzed the latest reports. The Thren were closing in on Earth, and this battle would be the final stand for her people. "We don't have much time," Commander James Novak said, his voice grim. "Our defenses are holding, but we can't last much longer." Elena nodded, her mind racing through possible strategies. The odds were against them, but humanity had always thrived in the face of impossible challenges. "We fight," she said finally, her voice steady, "and we make them remember why humanity should never be underestimated." The Thren, confident in their overwhelming superiority, prepared for the final strike. Their fleets were massive, their technology unmatched, and they had studied humanity for years, learning their strengths and weaknesses. What they could never truly understand, however, was the human spirit. As the battle raged on, humanity's unique ability to adapt became their greatest weapon. Captain Mendez and her crew began to implement unconventional strategies, exploiting the rigid thinking of the Thren. The humans' creativity, born from countless generations of struggle and survival, allowed them to turn even the most desperate situations into opportunities. Aboard the Thren flagship, Admiral Zyros watched the battle unfold with growing frustration. The humans should have been crushed by now. Instead, they fought with a ferocity that defied all logic. "They're like vermin," Zyros growled. "They should be finished, but they just keep coming." His second-in-command, Commander Tarkis, frowned. "It's their unpredictability. They don't follow the rules of war as we understand them." Zyros clenched his fists. "Then we will show them the true meaning of annihilation." But as the Thren prepared their final assault, humanity revealed their trump card, an advanced self-repairing fleet, a technological marvel born from desperation and necessity. The ships, powered by cutting-edge AI, could anticipate enemy movements and adapt on the fly, making them nearly impossible to destroy. The tide of battle began to shift. The Thren, once unstoppable, now found themselves outmatched by the very species they had long underestimated. Moloch's decision to contact the humans had been made in desperation. His people, the Balan, were on the brink of extinction, their colonies burned to cinders by the relentless Thar forces. Moloch, a seasoned officer, had witnessed more destruction than he could bear to recount. The Thar had advanced too quickly, their technology too superior, their hunger for dominance insatiable. No fleet in the galaxy could stand against them, least of all the pitiful remnants of the Balan defense. In the moments after the human distress call was sent, Moloch found himself staring at the bleak expanse of space, waiting. His wingmate, Cavil, stood next to him, his eye stalks drooping in a mixture of fear and disbelief. "They won't come," Cavil muttered, his voice thick with doubt. "Humans, they're not our allies. They'll see this as a death sentence." Moloch remained silent. He had no illusions about the humans. Their reputation in the galaxy was legendary, but not in the way most might hope. For centuries, the humans had been regarded as dangerous, unpredictable, even psychotic. Every species that encountered them in battle feared them, not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their sheer tenacity. When humans fought, they fought like cornered animals, refusing to surrender even in the face of overwhelming odds. They were called killers, and in many ways, they lived up to that name. But Murloc also knew something else about them, something few others had recognized. Humans, despite their fearsome reputation, had a strange sense of honor. They didn't fight without purpose. They didn't destroy without reason. And in their darkest moments, they were capable of incredible acts of heroism. The Balan had rejected the humans' offers of help before, mocking their warlike ways and dismissing them as brutes. But now, with the Thaw bearing down on the last Balan world, Murloc had no choice. He had to hope that somewhere, beneath the blood and fury, there was a part of humanity that still believed in saving the innocent. "They'll come," Murloc whispered, more to himself than to Cavil. "They have to." Just as the silence of space seemed to stretch into eternity, the sensor alarms on the ship blared to life. Murloc snapped his head up, his eye stalks widening in shock. On the screen, dozens of ships appeared, materializing out of the void like wraiths. But these were not Thor ships. These were human vessels. "Impossible," Cavil gasped, his voice trembling. "They're actually here." The fleet that had arrived was unlike anything Murloc had ever seen. Human warships were not sleek or elegant like the Balan or Thor designs. They were brutal, angular machines, bristling with weapons and reinforced armor. They looked more like flying fortresses than spaceships. At the head of the fleet was a colossal dreadnought, its dark hull covered in the scars of 1,000 battles. Its size dwarfed even the largest of the Three's capital ships, and its mere presence sent a ripple of fear through the Balan crew. Before Murloc could react, a communications signal was received. The voice that came through was deep, calm, and unmistakably human. "This is Admiral Rebecca Hart of the Earth Federation Navy," the voice said. "We received your distress call. You have 3 minutes to surrender your fleet to our command, or we will proceed with our own strategy." Murloc's mandibles clicked in surprise. The humans hadn't come to negotiate or discuss strategy. They had come to take over. "Surrender," Cavil sputtered. "They want us to." "Shut up," Murloc barked, his voice sharp. He hit the communication button, addressing the human fleet. "This is Captain Murloc of the Balan Defense. We acknowledge your arrival and are prepared to assist in any way we can. But Admiral, we have to work together if we're going to." "You misunderstand, Captain," Admiral Hart interrupted, her voice icy. "You are no longer in command. You've brought us into this war. Now you'll do exactly as we say. Failure to comply will result in the immediate destruction of your ships." Murloc froze, his mind racing. He had expected the humans to be forceful, but this was a takeover. But then again, what choice did he have? Without the humans, the Balan were doomed. If surrendering control was the price to pay for survival, so be it. "Understood," Murloc said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "We are at your disposal." The communication ended, and Murloc turned to face Cavil, whose eye stalks were twitching nervously. "They're going to get us killed," Cavil muttered, his voice shaking. "I knew this was a mistake." Murloc clenched his mandibles but said nothing. He wasn't sure if the humans were going to save them or lead them into certain death. But one thing was clear: the battle had already begun. As the Balan fleet fell into formation behind the humans, Murloc watched in awe as the human warships moved with ruthless precision. Unlike the chaotic, desperate tactics of the Balan, the humans fought like a well-oiled machine, their ships coordinating perfectly to form a deadly, impenetrable wall of firepower. The Thor ships, which had once seemed so invincible, now found themselves under siege. The humans attacked with a ferocity that left the Thor commanders scrambling to react. Massive railguns fired kinetic slugs the size of small buildings, ripping through Thor hulls like tissue paper. Swarms of drones darted through the battlefield, tearing apart enemy fighters with surgical precision. But it wasn't just the weapons that were terrifying, it was the humans themselves. Human Marines, clad in exosuits that amplified their already considerable strength, launched boarding actions against the Thar vessels. Murloc watched in stunned silence as the humans fought their way through the corridors of Thar warships, their sheer brutality overwhelming the enemy at every turn. "They're monsters," Cavil whispered, his voice barely audible. "No wonder the galaxy fears them." Murloc couldn't disagree. The humans fought like demons, their rage and determination unmatched by anything he had ever seen. But amidst the chaos, there was something else, something that gave Murloc a glimmer of hope. The humans weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for the Balan too. As the battle raged on, Murloc realized that the humans had deliberately positioned their fleet to protect the smaller, weaker Balan ships. Whenever a Thar vessel targeted a Balan ship, a human warship would move to intercept, shielding the Balan with its own armor and firepower. For all their savagery, the humans hadn't come to destroy. They had come to save. Hours passed, and the tide of battle began to turn. The Thar, who had once been unstoppable, now found themselves on the defensive. Their ships, once so dominant, were now outmaneuvered and outgunned. The humans were relentless, pressing the attack with an intensity that left no room for the Thar to recover. And then, finally, it happened. The Thar flagship, a massive dreadnought that had been the center of their fleet, was destroyed in a spectacular explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, sending debris flying in all directions. With their command ship gone, the remaining Thar forces panicked, retreating in disarray. The battle was over. The humans had won. As the last of the Thar ships disappeared into the void, Murloc slumped back in his chair, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. He had never imagined that the humans could pull off such a victory. They had turned the impossible into reality. A communication signal came through once again. It was Admiral Hart. "Captain Murloc," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The Thar are retreating, but don't be fooled, they will return. And when they do, we will be ready. For now, your people are safe." Murloc exhaled, his heart still racing. "Thank you, Admiral. We owe you our lives." "Don't thank us yet," Hart replied. "This war is far from over. But if you're willing to follow our lead, we'll make sure the Balan survive." Murloc nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He had no choice but to trust the humans now. They had proven themselves to be both killers and saviors. And in the darkness of space, where survival was all that mattered, that was enough. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Murloc found himself thinking about the future. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long. But now, with the humans as their unlikely allies, the Balan might just have a fighting chance. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The days following the battle were a whirlwind for Captain Murloc and the Balan. The human victory had secured a fragile peace, but it was clear that the Thar would not remain silent for long. The Balan were grateful but wary, and the humans were resolute but distant. The alliance, though forged in fire, was still in its infancy, and mistrust lingered like a shadow of the fragile peace. Admiral Rebecca Hart had taken command of the Balan's surviving fleet, integrating them into the Earth Federation Navy's operational structure. The Balan crews, who had once been scattered and demoralized, were now a part of something greater. The integration process was not without its challenges: cultural differences, differing military doctrines, and the sheer complexity of combining two disparate fleets created friction. Murloc found himself at the heart of these changes, working closely with human officers to coordinate their efforts. The humans had their own way of doing things, often blunt, sometimes brutal, but undeniably effective. They had a sense of purpose and discipline that was both intimidating and inspiring. Murloc and his crew, used to a more cautious and strategic approach, had to adapt quickly. In the command center of the human flagship, the EFS Valkyrie, Murloc sat at a conference table surrounded by human officers. Admiral Hart was at the head of the table, her presence commanding and authoritative. "Captain Murloc," she said, her tone measured, "we're preparing for the next phase of the campaign. The Thori are regrouping and will likely strike back with increased force. We need to solidify our defenses and prepare for their counterattack. Murloc nodded, his eye stalks fixed on the display screens around the room. The room was filled with holographic projections of the galaxy, showing Thor movements and Balan positions. The humans had a sophisticated grasp of galactic strategy, using technology that was both impressive and intimidating. Our resources are stretched thin, Murloc said. We can't afford another engagement of this magnitude without reinforcements. Agreed, Hart replied. We're working on that. We've sent out distress signals to our allies and are mobilizing additional forces, but we also need to improve our intelligence. The Thori are unpredictable, and we need to anticipate their moves. A human officer, Lieutenant Commander Evans, interjected. We've set up a series of reconnaissance missions to monitor the Thor communications and movements. We're also integrating Balan intelligence assets to get a more comprehensive picture. The integration of Balan intelligence was a delicate subject. The Balan had their own methods of gathering and interpreting data, which often conflicted with human approaches. Murloc had to navigate these differences carefully, ensuring that both sides contributed effectively without stepping on each other's toes. As the meeting continued, Murloc's mind drifted to the broader implications of their alliance. The humans had saved them from annihilation, but at what cost? The Balan were now part of a larger conflict, and their future was uncertain. They had become pawns in a galactic struggle far beyond their initial understanding. In the days that followed, the Balan and human forces worked tirelessly to fortify their positions and prepare for the inevitable Thor counteroffensive. The humans were relentless in their preparations, their efficiency and focus a stark contrast to the more cautious Balan approach. Murloc watched as human engineers and soldiers worked around the clock, building defenses, refining strategies, and pushing their limits. The Balan crews, initially hesitant, began to adapt to the human way of war. They learned to work with human technology, to fight alongside their human counterparts, and to embrace the sheer intensity of the human approach. The transformation was not easy. There were clashes, misunderstandings, and moments of tension. But slowly, trust began to build. One evening, Murloc found himself in the mess hall of the EFS Valkyrie, sharing a meal with a group of human officers. The mess hall was a bustling, noisy place, filled with the clatter of cutlery and the hum of conversation. The human officers were an eclectic mix, some boisterous, others reserved, all united by a sense of camaraderie. Captain Murloc, Lieutenant Commander Evans said, gesturing to an empty seat, "Join us for a drink. We don't bite. Well, not unless provoked." Murloc hesitated, but then took the offered seat. He had been wary of the human crew, unsure of how to interact with them outside the confines of formal meetings. But as he settled into the chair, he realized that this was an opportunity to bridge the gap between their cultures. The conversation started with small talk about the latest developments, the state of their ships, and the ever-present threat of the Thar. But as the evening wore on, the discussion turned more personal. "So, Captain," Evans said, leaning back in his chair, "what's it like being on the other side of the galaxy from your home?" Murloc considered the question for a moment. "It's disorienting. We're used to the Balan way of doing things. Everything here is different, faster, more aggressive, but I suppose we're adapting." "Adapting," Evans said, nodding. "That's the key to survival out here. We all have to adapt, no matter where we come from. It's the only way we can make it through this mess." Another officer, Lieutenant Ramirez, chimed in. "You know, when we first heard about the Balan, we didn't know what to expect. Stories of your people were mixed. Some said you were noble and honorable. Others said you were just another target. But seeing you fight alongside us, it's changed our perspective." Murloc tilted his head. "And how has it changed?" Ramirez shrugged. "Well, for one, we've seen that the Balan are more than just targets. You're fighters, survivors, and that means something to us." The conversation continued, and as the evening wore on, Murloc found himself relaxing. The human officers were blunt but sincere, and their willingness to engage with him on a personal level helped dissolve some of the barriers between them. He began to see the humans not just as allies but as individuals, each with their own stories and struggles. The day of the anticipated Thor counteroffensive arrived with a sense of grim anticipation. The humans had prepared meticulously, their fleets arrayed in defensive formations around key positions. The Balan, now fully integrated into the human strategy, were ready to contribute their own strength to the fight. Murloc stood on the bridge of the EFS Valkyrie, his eyes fixed on the display screens that showed the approaching Thar fleet. The sight was as daunting as ever, hundreds of ships moving with the precision of a deadly symphony. "Captain, we're detecting a significant energy buildup in the Thar fleet," Evans said, his voice steady despite the tension. "They're preparing for a large-scale assault." "Understood," Murloc replied. "We'll need to adjust our defensive positions. Prepare the Balan ships for coordinated maneuvers." The battle began with a ferocity that left no room for doubt. The Thor attacked with overwhelming force, their ships launching a barrage of missiles and energy beams that lit up the void. The human and Balan fleets responded with equal intensity, their combined firepower creating a storm of destruction that shook the very fabric of space. The Balan ships, once hesitant, fought with newfound resolve. Their crews had learned to operate in concert with their human counterparts, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns that created a deadly crossfire. Murloc marveled at the transformation. The Balan, once on the brink of extinction, were now a vital part of a larger force. Amidst the chaos, Murloc and Admiral Hart coordinated their efforts with precision. The Thar, though formidable, were now facing an opponent that was both relentless and adaptable. The combined might of the human and Balan fleets proved more than a match for the Thuri's aggressive tactics. Hours passed and the battle reached its climax. The Thar, unable to sustain their assault against the relentless pressure, began to retreat. The sight of their flagship exploding in a massive fireball was a welcome signal that the tide had turned. As the remnants of the Thor fleet fled into the darkness, Murloc stood on the bridge, his heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The battle had been won, but the cost had been high. The human and Balan forces had suffered losses, and the scars of the conflict would linger long after the last Thor ship had vanished. Admiral Hart approached Murloc, her expression a mixture of fatigue and satisfaction. "Captain, we've done it. The Thor have been driven back." Murloc nodded, his mandibles clicking in acknowledgement. "Yes, Admiral. We fought well together." Hart extended her hand, a gesture that Murloc had come to recognize as a sign of respect. "Thank you, Captain. Your people fought bravely. We forged something here, something that goes beyond mere survival." Murloc took her hand, feeling the strength of the human grip. "And we will continue to fight together. The Thor will return, but we will be ready." As the remnants of the battle were cleared and the fleet began the process of regrouping and rebuilding, Murloc looked out at the stars, his thoughts turning to the future. The alliance between the Balan and humans had been tested in the crucible of war, and though it was still young and fragile, it had proven its strength. In the harsh reality of galactic conflict, trust and cooperation were not given freely. They were earned, forged in the fires of battle and tempered by the will to survive. Murloc knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he also knew that together, they were stronger than they had ever been alone. As the stars shone brightly in the void, Murloc and the humans prepared for the battles yet to come. Their alliance, born of necessity, had become a beacon of hope in the darkness of the galaxy, and with each passing day, they grew closer to the dream of a lasting peace. A peace built not just on the remnants of victory, but on the enduring strength of their shared resolve. The respite following the Thra's defeat was short-lived. While the humans and Balan celebrated their hard-won victory, the galaxy remained a volatile place, and old rivalries were not so easily erased. The Thar were not the only threat lurking in the darkness. Other factions and alien species were watching with keen interest, ready to exploit any sign of weakness. Hart gestured to the screen, which displayed a series of intercepted communications. The messages were fragmented, but clearly distressing. "We've been monitoring chatter from various sources. It appears that the foe were not acting alone." Murlock's eye stalks narrowed in concern. "You think they have allies?" "It's more than that," Hart replied, her voice heavy. "We've detected signals that suggest the involvement of a previously unknown faction. They're calling themselves the Umbra Syndicate. From what we've gathered, they're a shadowy organization with interests in destabilizing the galaxy for their gain." The screen shifted to show a series of images depicting a variety of alien species, many of which were unfamiliar to Murlock. "These are some of the races we believe are affiliated with the Syndicate. They operate through subterfuge and sabotage, and they're known for manipulating conflicts to their advantage." Murlock studied the images, his thoughts racing. If the Umbra Syndicate is involved, it explains the sudden surge in Thor aggression. They're using the Thor as a proxy to weaken us. "That's our assessment," Hart agreed. "We need to prepare for potential sabotage and infiltration. The Syndicate is adept at operating behind the scenes, so we need to be vigilant." The discussion turned to strategies for countering the Syndicate's influence. Both the human and Balan forces had to adapt to a new kind of warfare, one that involved not just open battles, but also intelligence operations and counter-sabotage measures. As the weeks progressed, the alliance between the humans and Balan faced new tests. The Syndicate's presence became increasingly evident as several incidents of sabotage and espionage were reported. Equipment failures, mysterious malfunctions, and unexplainable losses plagued the joint operations. The mood among the crews grew tense as they began to suspect that the Syndicate was among them. Captain Murlock and Admiral Hart decided to take proactive measures. They set up a joint task force to address the threat of the Syndicate. This task force, comprised of the best intelligence officers from both the Earth Federation Navy and the Balan Fleet, was tasked with uncovering the extent of the Syndicate's influence and rooting out any infiltrators. One evening, Murlock was briefed by Lieutenant Commander Evans and Balan intelligence officer, Chief Tarek, in a secure briefing room aboard the EFS Valkyrie. The room was stark and utilitarian, a place reserved for the most sensitive discussions. "We've identified several key targets for infiltration," Evans said, pointing to a holographic map of their operational area. "These are places where we've experienced the most sabotage. We suspect that the Syndicate has operatives stationed at these locations." Chief Tarek added, "We've also intercepted communications indicating that the Syndicate is planning a major operation. They're aiming to create a major incident that will turn the rest of the galaxy against us." Murlock's antennae twitched in thought. "What's their goal?" "Chaos," Tarek replied grimly. "The Syndicate thrives on conflict. If they can sow enough discord, they'll profit from the ensuing chaos." The task force began to implement measures to counteract the Syndicate's schemes. Increased security protocols were put in place, and a series of covert operations were launched to identify and apprehend suspected infiltrators. The Balan and human forces worked in tandem, sharing intelligence and conducting joint sweeps of vulnerable locations. Despite their efforts, the Syndicate proved to be a cunning adversary. They struck with precision, targeting key supply lines and communication nodes. The Alliance forces were forced to adapt quickly, their operations disrupted by a series of well-coordinated attacks. One particularly troubling incident occurred when a critical supply convoy was ambushed, leading to the loss of vital resources. The convoy had been transporting essential components for the repair and maintenance of both human and Balan ships. The attack was a significant setback, exacerbating the already strained logistics of the joint fleet. Captain Murlock and Admiral Hart convened an emergency meeting to address the situation. The room was filled with tension as they reviewed the aftermath of the attack and discussed their next steps. "This is becoming untenable," Hart said, her voice strained. "We need to identify the Syndicate's operatives and put an end to their sabotage. If we don't, we risk losing everything we fought for. Murloc agreed. We need to escalate our efforts. We should consider deploying specialized teams to hunt down these operatives and dismantle their network. The task force, bolstered by additional resources and personnel, launched a series of high-risk operations aimed at dismantling the syndicate's infrastructure. The operations were dangerous and often yielded only partial results, but each success brought them closer to understanding the syndicate's full extent. Amid the mounting pressures, Murloc found solace in the camaraderie that had developed between the Balan and human forces. Despite the challenges, the bond between their peoples had grown stronger. They had learned to rely on one another, their shared experiences forging a sense of unity that transcended their differences. One evening, Murloc and Admiral Hart attended a joint celebration held in honor of the Alliance's resilience. The event was a rare moment of respite, a chance for the crews to unwind and strengthen their bonds. The celebration was held in the main hall of the EFS Valkyrie, a large, open space filled with decorations and lights. The atmosphere was festive, with music playing and various alien and human dishes displayed on long tables. Murloc found himself mingling with human officers and Balan crew members. The air was filled with laughter and conversation, a welcome distraction from the ongoing conflict. Murloc engaged in conversations about human customs and traditions, finding himself increasingly comfortable with the people around him. During the event, Admiral Hart approached Murloc, a rare smile on her face. "Captain, I wanted to take a moment to thank you. Your leadership and cooperation have been invaluable to us." Murloc inclined his head. "And yours to us. We wouldn't have come this far without your support. We've become more than allies. We've become friends." Hart nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and determination. "We've faced many challenges together, and we'll face more. But as long as we stand united, we'll overcome them." As the celebration continued, Murloc and Hart shared a quiet moment, looking out at the mingling crews. The Alliance, though tested, had forged a bond that was proving resilient in the face of adversity. The next phase of their struggle came with a new and unexpected development. The Syndicate had planned their most audacious move yet, a large-scale assault designed to plunge the galaxy into chaos. The attack was coordinated with precision, targeting multiple key locations simultaneously. Captain Murloc and Admiral Hart received the intelligence briefing in the command center of the EFS Valkyrie. The room was filled with a sense of urgency as the threat was assessed. "This is their biggest move yet," Hart said, her voice tense. "We need to mobilize our forces and respond quickly. If we don't, the consequences could be catastrophic." Murloc nodded. "We'll coordinate our efforts and strike at their key assets. We can't let them disrupt our operations any further." The Alliance forces sprang into action, their response swift and coordinated. The Balan and human fleets launched a series of counterattacks, targeting Syndicate operations and trying to mitigate the damage caused by their assault. The battle that followed was intense, a chaotic clash of firepower and strategy. The Syndicate's forces were formidable, but the combined might of the human and Balan fleets proved to be a powerful counterforce. The engagement was fierce, with both sides suffering significant losses. Amidst the chaos, Captain Murloc and Admiral Hart coordinated their efforts, their leadership and determination guiding their forces through the tumult. The battle was a test of their resolve, a challenge that demanded the full extent of their capabilities. As the fighting continued, it became clear that the Syndicate's offensive was faltering. The Alliance's response had been effective, and the Syndicate's forces began to retreat. The battle, though costly, marked a turning point in their struggle against the shadowy adversaries. In the aftermath of the battle, the Alliance forces regrouped and assessed the damage. The conflict had taken a toll on both sides, but the resilience and unity of the human and Balan